Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Broker Breakdown with myself and James. And today we had, I think, a topic that has probably been maybe not overlooked by any means, but just a topic that a lot of people may or may not find of interest with respect to kind of servicing over things like wait times, overall, I think, challenges as part of not only our business, but the insurance company side of the business with respect to service. And, kind of the outfalling there, James, of what happened to service because of COVID and a few things. So, I mean, there's certainly things to chat about today that people might find valuable or at least help, with expectations about what's been going on the last couple of years and also what to look out for moving forward.
Yeah, it's no surprise that even before the pandemic, we were seeing declining service rates, not only in our industry, but I think customer service has really become an industry, or I guess a value or a trait for a lot of people that, again, just has been declining. And I think COVID really pushed that off the cliff violently. And we've seen that, like I said, not only in our industry, but again, you could probably go to any other industry and ask them the same questions, and they would probably say customer service is a big issue in any industry, realistically. And a lot of clients that I get say that that's a big thing that they worry about or have issues with, is that people just don't respond. People don't call them back. Wait times are just absolutely insane. They're basically spending half a day on hold to get to talk to anyone, and kind of stuff like that. And again, it's just, for us, I'm not saying we're perfect either, but again, it's very unfortunate to hear that from clients, because again, when they put their trust in someone and hopefully want to help them out with, again, purchases that are, Mike, I would almost argue, are probably your biggest purchases you're ever going to make in your cars or your home, or again, life insurance or whatever it might be, you want to make sure that you're being dealt with in a reasonable amount of time. And again, reasonable is very different, because some people think reasonable is within 25 minutes. And again, that's not really realistic. But again, that's kind of what this conversation today is going to be about, is where the change is coming from, or what's really happening with that change. And again, just kind of setting some realistic timelines on just how things are realistically going right now.
Yeah, there's been, and I mean, part of this, part of what I thought really maybe changed the landscape is that, especially in insurance, we'll stick to that obviously because that's what our podcast is about. But a lot of people in the last, I don't know, I would say 5, maybe 10 years max, right when I first started in the industry, there was a lot of this push towards, the digital footprint and kind of getting quicker opportunities for quotes, right? So getting online, being able to bind and quote an insurance policy in a matter of minutes without even needing to talk to someone. It was physically just, put in your information online and we'll be able to get stuff done for you. And then from there, take it to either A, a representative, or B, just never speak to someone again. But I had a lot of concern with that before. And I think even more concern now about that, because the online model where it's there's no human interaction, it leaves a lot of opportunity for not only human error in that process, but also when you need to actually utilize that policy, James, are you being protected or insured the way that you thought you were when you signed up the policy, right?
And that's a big talking point, because we're licensed for a reason, right? Like, it's not like we just wake up one day and go, oh, we want to be insurance brokers. Like, you have to go through the whole licensing and learn and make sure you know about the products that you're actually selling. And again, the online model that you were saying is convenient. Like, you're not talking to anyone, but again, it opens up to, if you're not a professional, and again, a lot of people, regular consumers, really don't know a whole lot about insurance. They just know, okay, I'm covered for this and this, but they don't know the actual in-depth like wordings, the in-depth like additional coverages that you might get. So the average person is not going to go and add on additional coverages, because all that really does to them is it increases their premium, but they actually don't know what that actually does. So without an explanation from a licensed professional, you would have no idea. But I say to all my consumers and all my clients, when you sell your house, you're going to use a realtor. When you do your taxes, you're going to do a financial advisor or an accountant. So why for insurance are you not going to use an insurance broker or an insurance agent when you need a professional that knows what they're doing all the time?
This is part of why the episode's so important, is the servicing aspect. So I would argue or say that one of the easiest parts of the process is actually just signing up for a policy. It's what happens afterwards, right? So, I mean, a few examples that we come across, or what I come across all the time that I find there's value in using someone like a brokerage, is you have that, a new home you've purchased that doesn't have water coverage on it, but you want it, and you don't have that person you can actually relate to. It's just, it's your online policy documents from XYZ insurance company, but there's nothing tangible to it. So if you don't have that representative in your corner, how do you know who to ask about, is there an alternative option, or something as simple as, what could be a change on your auto policy that reflects in a larger or lower premium and you're seeing billing changes, or even as simple as, the shop process, James, that people may or may not be aware of, where, on a renewal, we'll take a look to see, is there a better option? Is maybe the current company you're with still valuable? All of these things I just mentioned are bits of the servicing that we do that, technically speaking, you're not getting additional, payment or commission for. It's part of what I would consider the value added process of being with a brokerage, or a broker specifically, someone you trust and know and like, and then giving them that opportunity to say, hey, you're going to be kind of buying into the knowledge that I have. If you have questions, reach out any time, right? And I guess the point of that was some of those larger online platforms or insurance providers that are heavily marketed, they don't necessarily provide all those things. So after you get that original policy signed and set up, you've paid for a promise of trust that you don't necessarily know what you have. So then when a claims experience does happen, it's like, oh my God, I didn't have what I thought I had. And then the whole industry, takes a dive, as we know, because there's a lot of negative comments. So I think the servicing side of a brokerage is still very valuable, and we might see more of a shift with that again in the future.
I said this to a client yesterday, actually, and it's funny that we're doing this kind of topic today. Is I said to him, I don't ever guarantee that my prices are going to be lower, because that's just something I can never uphold, because again, the insurance industry is a roller coaster. We go through these ups, we go through these downs. So again, I'm not going to sit here and guarantee my premiums are always going to be the best. What I can guarantee you is that my service is going to be better than anyone else out in the market. So when you need things to get done, I'm going to be there to get things done for you. And again, sometimes you have to pay a little bit more for that service. But as a consumer myself, I would rather pay more for that service to have someone that actually knows who I am, who my family is, what my situation is, than someone that just picks up the phone and I'm a policy number to them. Because how many times do you just call somewhere and they go, hey, Mike, or first and last name, mortgage number or insurance policy number? Like, they don't know who you actually are, right? Where for us, we, like, when people call, like, I can almost look at my phone and be like, okay, I know exactly who that person is. I know that they have 2 kids. I know that their kids play hockey on Saturdays. That's kind of what you're getting out of that, right? But again, and to Mike's point, I feel like we've gone away from that personal touch. And that personal touch is, again, I think what a lot of people still want and desire in the services that they look for, that they're just not a policy number to someone, that they actually are true humans that have like families, and again, like they're, who that actual person is, not just policy number 1 2 3 4 5.
Right. And what I'll say to add on to that is that I've seen maybe what I value too as a client outside of insurance, right? Not for what we do, but what I value myself is that when I'm going to make like a purchase, whether it's for a service or a product, I kind of value the whole transaction process a little bit more now, James, maybe because I'm in sales and I have been now for a little while, but like what value are they providing that somebody else isn't? So for example, like a piece of furniture, I can go to 4 or 5 of the larger big box stores and maybe there's delivery or warranty, or maybe there's pricing or a price match, or there's different things that I can value. Every client, like myself in that instance, is going to value different things, but it's kind of the job of the salesperson to find out what is the most valuable as not a pain point, but find out what the most important thing is and then deliver what that client wants. And if the person's happy with that thing, it might necessarily mean that the product or service isn't the lowest on the price, but it's something they valued when they purchase it, right? If that makes sense. So, I mean, insurance, I mean, if we look at that as a whole, you're not buying anything tangible, right? Home and auto insurance, you're basically buying the trust and the promise of a policy or representative, I guess you could say, that's giving you information that you will need if you need to submit that life-altering claim or that massive loss to your house or maybe some injuries in an auto accident. It's those types of things that only come to light when the claim happens. So I guess for insurance, it's, do you trust the person you have it with? And if the answer is no, I would always highly recommend, finding someone that, you I guess, trust in that instance, because it's so easy to find a generic price online, James, for anything for insurance, but it doesn't necessarily mean that any of the coverages being offered are the same. But it also doesn't mean, and I guess I'll mention this because it came to mind right away, that the underwriting side, so all of the information that you have provided your broker agent, as well as the agent asking you questions or the broker asking you questions, that's a conversation to build how that policy is done. So if that back and forth conversation is not happening, it opens the entire policy up to the possibility for not only, maybe a misrepresentation or a non-disclosure. It might just open it up where when you make that phone call, there's no help at the end of the line. It's just, sorry, you didn't have this. And then you get the, well, what am I paying for sort of thing, right? So I guess the whole point was having that person you trust within a service-based industry like insurance is vitally probably one of the most important aspects of that transaction.
See, I'm very critical when it comes to customer service because, again, I think what me and Mike show to our clients and what our office, I think, in general shows to our clients, because we work with again, I say this every single time I talk about it, I think I work with the best group of people in the industry, because every time something happens, I can count on either one of the group of us to get things done. But it's, like I said, that makes me very critical because I always want to think that outside of our office, that's also how other businesses uphold their values. But again, sometimes that's not the case. Like, for example, I go to a lot of dealerships. I work with a lot of dealerships across the country, or I would love to across the country, but across Ontario. And I was literally just at one this weekend because I was just looking. I was just trying to kill some time and looking at vehicles and whatnot. Not just because I want to buy a vehicle, but just because, again, I like to know the product that I'm selling. So if people ask me questions about a vehicle and I have no idea, I like to kind of go learn myself and go, oh, okay, this is why they're looking at this, because this is like safety or like features on it look kind of cool, Mike. So again, it's interesting like that. So again, I went to the dealership. I was probably there for about 20 minutes or so, walked around the whole lot. And it was a big lot. And not once was I approached by anyone. So I was kind of like, oh, that almost like, I feel like, and again, it's a weekend. I know they're probably slow. But again, I was like, man, like, was that kind of like a fumbled opportunity to come out and like talk to me and kind of, even if I wasn't wanting to buy a vehicle, but at least you kind of meet someone new. And again, especially in the industry that I'm in, I'm always looking to meet new people and to work with new dealerships and whatnot. So like for that experience, I was like, oh, you know what? Like I kind of felt like almost like secondhand, almost like no one even wanted to come out and like say hi to me or like ask me questions or anything like that.
And you know what? It's interesting you mentioned that, because as you were saying that, I wanted to my immediate response to be like, Yeah, that's ridiculous. But then I took a step back for a second. I thought there's so many people out there nowadays that kind of look at salesmen in all industries as that quick sale, James. And I think this is where some of the industry trends have really changed the consumer idea about buying. So for myself and obviously yourself in this case, you wanted someone to come over, at least just say hi, introduce, and maybe say, hey, I'm available if you have any questions, but by all means, take a look. Like one of those just kind of brief interactions. But what's funny about that is the alternative side is that there are so many people out there now that kind of have that maybe trauma relationship with a salesperson somewhere in their past, where it's like if you're chatting with them, they automatically only want your business for the quick cash sale. It's not about the relationship or if they can actually help. So you see people shying away, right? Or not making eye contact for the purpose that it's, I don't want to chat with them until I'm ready. And when I'm ready, I'll go up. But it's funny because as you said that, and I know a lot of people in that other side, you're saying in your mind, I just want someone to come up and say, hey, I'm so-and-so. I'm here if you need me. But, by all means, take as much time as you want, look around, and, I'll be here if and when the time comes, right? So there's two vastly different sides to how you approach every person. And I think most people historically, maybe in the last 20 years that's changed, wanted someone to like help them out. But now there's this whole next generation of people that are kind of scarred in a sense, where it's like, I don't want
stay
anybody.
Away from me.
Yeah, right. Like I remember seeing a funny video where it was, growing up 20 years ago, there was like this funny video, and this is just a completely different sidebar topic, but it was, somebody would knock on your front door, and it was almost like a comic piece where it said, which one of you can get up from the kitchen table quick enough and like go answer the door, right? It could have been a neighbor, a friend, family, somebody was coming to visit you. And then the video switches over to how nowadays, if a doorbell rings, everyone's like throwing themselves into locked bedrooms behind curtains and stuff. It's like, there's no chance I'm looking at the door because they think it's true. Like a sales rep, or they think it's maybe someone with the wrong ill intentions. But it put it in perspective that there's like this massive shift in how we view certain things based on other standards or maybe experiences, you could say.
And again, that's all going to come down to consumer traits, right? Like for me as a consumer, I value that person more than the person that doesn't do anything, that shows no effort. If someone's coming to knock on my door and putting the effort in and putting the time and pounding the pavement, I appreciate and I respect that person more because they're trying, right? They're actually physically trying to do something. But I also get the flip side of things where consumers are like, oh, you know what? Like, especially at dealerships, I find like dealerships is like one of those big things is like, oh, that person's coming in. Let's run back to the car as quick as possible and drive away, right? Because we don't want to talk to that person. But even for me, like for emails, for example, like when I send an email out, again, I have this very high expectation that I don't personally, and this might be the wrong opinion, I just don't think anyone is that busy enough to not respond to an email within 24 hours. I just personally don't agree with it. You're telling me in the digital world that we live in right now, where emails are on our phones, they go directly to us, you're telling me you can't respond to an email, especially, and you know what? I'll say maybe for the people that work a 9 to 5 and they're not directly connected to the business, that's fine. They're turning off. But like a small business owner, you're telling me that you can't respond back to my email within 24 hours. I'm sorry, but no one on this planet is that busy to not respond to that email. But again, that's just my high expectations of people and the values that I want to work with people is that when I see people respond back like super quick like that, I go, wow, this person's like really on top of like their work or their business, right? And again, I respect that because like I said, I just don't think emails or even phone calls should take more than 24 hours to respond back. I just don't think anyone's that busy personally.
Yeah, there's definitely a side to that too, depending on what type of role you're in, where it's the accountability aspect, because as salespeople, a lot of how you build that trust and that goodwill with clients and referrals is by making sure that you're kind of giving them the best service possible, especially for, service-based industries. But you're right. There is a large section though that are in like the service-based side like in like customer service roles in any industry that are paid, maybe like hourly or salary. And that's not necessarily the same mindset too, right? Like those people are going to do maybe what they need to get by. And I think we've actually seen a lot of that in different sectors, especially insurance, because, we've all heard it, James. You've been on a call trying to get a hold of someone, and it's, the same message now since COVID. It hasn't stopped, but it's kind of the running joke in my opinion, where it's, due to unforeseen circumstances, we have a higher call
volume is my favorite.
But
it's every day, no matter what time you call, it's always higher than normal call volume. I'm like, it's 8:30. You guys just opened up. Like, what are you talking about? Higher call volume. Like,
it's a choice though, right? Like to have that message play and to not have, maybe a proactive approach to that's a conscious decision by the company, right? And there's no specific, I'm not going to call anybody out on that, obviously, but if you literally have that message starting and you have enough clients where it's, possibly you need 30 people answering phones and instead you have 5 or 10, you're making a conscious effort to, pay a little bit less on salaries in hopes that the client expectations are met. That's where I think I preferably, as a broker, and things that I personally value, is that person's calling in, they want an answer right away. There's lots of studies out there that say if you don't get back to somebody within X number of minutes, you're going to either A, lose the new business, or you're going to, upset them enough where on the renewal time, they might leave as well, just based on lacking of service. And that's where, the pain points that I've seen with clients too, James, with service have, over the years anyways, have really been a talking point, right? Somebody will call in and say, hey, Mike, I got your number from so-and-so, or I got your name from so-and-so. And pricing's not horrendous. It's gone up a little bit, but I'm really just upset with the fact that when I call someone, I'm put on hold for an hour. And I can totally agree with that. Like, that's never really acceptable. And I know that it's easy from maybe a company perspective to say, we're trying to combat this, and this has been a problem, and that's been a problem. But the reality is, if that's been a problem for multiple years since COVID, you have to be a little bit more accountable and say, okay, maybe we should throw some more money towards service, if that's the thing, right? So, if that's a big company problem, I don't necessarily agree with it, but this would be like, again, one of those self-plugs that I do to say, making sure you have someone that you feel trusting enough, maybe even have their cell number. Maybe you can call them at any time. Maybe it's an email response within X number of minutes. It's what you said, James. Is the price more important than the service provided on the back end? And that's where the client's going to have their, maybe their priorities, right? Is it price first, service next? Is it service first, price next? Or what's that kind of middle ground?
I always tell clients that ask me, and they're always like, oh, what time do you guys close at today? And I'm like, well, technically 5 o'clock, but realistically, like, I'm never closed, because if in a sales role, you can't work 9 to 5. If you work 9 to 5, I'm sorry, you're just not going to be successful, because there's times where, deals take a little bit longer. You're closed at 5, but you know what? The client gets it to you at 6 o'clock. You got to do it at 6 o'clock. There's been times, and I'm going to guarantee Mike does the same thing, where he's online 2, 3, 4 hours after we close, because just things have to get done. Homes are closing, cars are being delivered, that kind of stuff, right? So again, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm a perfect human and I get back to everyone instantly. Like, there's sometimes on weekends where I go golfing and I accidentally leave my work phone at the home and I'm gone for 4 hours, and someone might call me or text me, and then I call them back or text them back and go, hey, you know what? Like, we're technically not open on weekends, but I was out of the office and I happened to come home and see your text. Is there anything urgent that I can do for you right now? So I think even just doing that, just setting the expectations for clients and saying, like, yes, technically we aren't closed, but if it's urgent, I can help you out. Even yesterday, I'll give you an example of yesterday. It was 9 o'clock at night, and I had a client message me on Facebook through a group that I'm in, and it was asking questions about a rental. I could have easily sat there and, responded this morning, but I responded back to him yesterday. And again, even if that person's not even technically a client of mine, I was still helping them out after hours and giving them knowledge that, again, their biggest pain point. And even if you go back to the post that he made, he's been trying to contact his broker for over a week now, and his broker hasn't got back to him. And I got back to him literally within, 25 minutes of him messaging me. Right. So again, I think the effort levels have definitely declined. And again, I know every person's different, but I think it's so important in today's world as a consumer to make sure that you're going to someone that not only you trust, like Mike said, but again, that actually has your best interests in mind. Because again, last night I really couldn't do anything for him, but again, I was messaging him and just kind of giving us some information that he can kind of go off of. There's not like I could physically go on and do something for him, but again, I was kind of putting his mind at ease without really doing much, just kind of responding. And again, some consumers just want a response. Even if, and again, that's a big thing that I do, is even if I can't give them an instant like satisfaction or change something instantly for them, I can still email them or text them or call them and go, you know what, like, let me look into that. Or, you know what, let me submit that change. I'll get back to you. That's all people really want, I feel. And again, if you're doing that, you're going to have a lot less issues than just not responding to someone and then 2 or 3 days go by and then they go, well, I haven't heard back from you. Like, what's going on?
Yeah. Again, that's just the service side, right? that's maybe what people expect. And meeting those expectations to the best of your ability, or at least, 90-95% of the time, I think is really fair for a lot of people, and they understand that. Also, as long as you're maybe out of the office, but you have like a reply email on, or even a phone message or something like that, it creates the understanding that you're not available right now, but you will be at this time. And that's not always the case with all insurance brokers and agents, at least from my experience. The one thing I wanted to bring up too, James, because I know we've had a pretty lengthy, great conversation on so far, but just to give people an idea on updates service-wise from insurance companies and kind of what to expect. I know over the summer, especially on the broker channel, there's a lot of people that take holidays. There's a lot of things that get done in summer because there's an increase in purchasing of homes, purchasing of cars, purchasing of investments, which obviously drives the amount of work being done, higher than it would maybe in the winter months. So from the company side, I know that it's always a little bit longer as well, especially if something you have to refer in takes some time from the insurance company to process itself. But is there anything that clients should maybe expect, or is there like a timeline, or what would your thoughts to someone on that, especially not if it's out of our hands, for example, if it's on maybe the company perspective?
I would just say be patient with your broker, because everything right now, not even just from an insurance standpoint, but I think from a lot of industries right now, are taking just a lot more time than they need to be. And again, there's a lot of reasons to that. I'm not really going to go into the reasons because that could be a 15-hour episode, but things are just taking a lot longer than they need to be. And you just got to be patient with that. Again, it's summertime. I don't agree with a lot of things that are going on, not only in our industry, but across multiple industries where there's staffing issues, but then you let all your staff go on vacation during the summertime. So that becomes even a bigger problem. But I would just say for now, probably at least until September or October, you're probably going to see a little bit of a longer processing time for new business. Probably a little bit of a longer process when it comes to changes on your policy, just because there's less people actually physically working in the insurance companies right now because it is summertime. Again, people are humans. They have to recharge. They have to reset. They can't just burn out, work throughout the summer, and then continue going on with life. Just, again, people take the time. Again, do I agree with it? No, personally. Like, I feel like if you're going to let people go on vacation, you should have a right amount of staff. But again, we know that not only in the insurance world, but basically in every industry right now, everyone's understaffed. Like, how many times do I go to like a restaurant or a dealership, for example, another great example, and they have like one salesperson there, and I'm like, oh, like, where is everyone? They're like, oh, we just can't hire anyone to come in, so like I'm stuck here by myself, basically. I hear that all the time, especially on weekends, because no one wants to work weekends. So I would just say set your expectations for right now, especially during the summer months, just because, again, summer, again, usually people are buying cars, they're moving. No one wants to move in the winter. Like, no one wants to trug their stuff through snow, so they try to do it all, I find, like during the summer months, or at least in the fall and into spring as well. But just set your expectations to probably see that things will just take a little bit longer than they normally are taking, just because it's summertime and people want to be out in the weather.
Yeah. Insurance companies are always battling, I think, staffing things with service, especially on claims as well. It takes longer to get back to people, and the shortages we've chatted about in previous episodes haven't helped at all. But I would say, it's you want to give enough time and have some patience to the process, but also at the same time, make sure you're getting the answers kind of when you need them, because it's easy to get pushed off as well. So
yes, there's a fine line between that. And again, right now I'm kind of being a little bit more lenient for some things, but there's other times where I'm like, wow, this is taking way too long. And again, I let companies know that, because again, I always say it is not fair to the consumer because you guys are behind. They have to wait for things. I'm sorry, that's just not fair to any consumer right now. And again, if it's an actual good reason, no problem. But if it's just because I haven't done this, that doesn't fly with me. I'm sorry, we cannot let consumers just be let out to dry because you haven't got to doing your job. And again, some companies are really good with that, and other companies have dropped the ball recently for me. And again, I have no problem telling them, you know what, you guys dropped the ball a little bit. And again, it's hard because then consumers, especially I find through the broker channel, I find consumers, they don't really hold a lot of value to what company they're placing with. They don't come to Billiard because they love Billiard. They come to Billiard because they love Mike or James, right? So I find if even if a company's dropping the ball, it makes the broker kind of look bad and the experience with the broker less, because things are taking longer, or the process might have not as been as smooth sailing as we wanted it to be.
You know what? I think that's also an industry-wide problem that is going to be combated a little bit better with technology as well. It's tough to say when that's going to happen because so many things are being automated now in the process. What I would say on maybe the claims front is that if we can get to a spot where claims are a little bit more real time on a service, where you're not waiting, a month, for example, to get a claims check, decisions like that will really help go a long way with the client wanting to stay with that insurance company, because the process was seamless. It went by easy enough where they actually, want to remain there, because claims experiences are probably one of the arguably biggest points as to why a client is going to leave that insurance company, right? Maybe they didn't necessarily have what they wanted. Now that could be a broker's fault or an agent's fault, but if it took longer than expected and there wasn't that communication from the adjuster, they might say, well, how do I know I can trust them when my entire insurance policy is based around me being able to submit a claim when I want to, right? Like when you think about it, that's really the heart of why you have an insurance policy, is to say, in that time of need, and some people never have that time of need, James, and so they hate insurance. Some people have utilized their policy in the past to say, I needed to put in a home claim, and they valued the experience. So, I mean, from a company perspective, if the claims experience is not to the client's satisfaction, then they may or may not keep that client on the renewal. And I guess, is that something they want to focus on, or is it not? And I think time will tell with that.
But how do we get there, though? Because this has been a talking point for many years, is how do we get that transition better? Like, how do we cut times, especially in the world that we live in right now, where the claims process is probably the most spread out process in the whole insurance transaction, because you're dealing with your agent or broker to get the claim done. You're now dealing with the actual insurance company. Then you're dealing with the claims adjuster. Then you're dealing with the rental car company. Then you're dealing with the body shop that's actually fixing your vehicle. So there's so many people we're waiting on. So how do we streamline that to make that process better on top of the industry of automobiles being so ever changing in the last 5 years that, again, when we've talked about this and hammered this home numerous times, parts are just not available. New vehicles are not available. Used vehicles aren't available. Mechanics are people just don't want to be mechanics anymore. So that you have less options to go to. Like how do we really streamline that is going to be the really important question of how can we really cut, especially claim times, down any more than they physically are right now?
Yeah, and I mean that's a fantastic question for an adjuster to have on the podcast, to say what are they allowed to talk about, or what is something that they would share on their views. I mean, if I had 2 cents on that, I mean, it's tough to say. I know some of the larger companies have gone to the owned and hired out and service centers that they own as well, in order to cut down not only on hopefully claims times, but the amount of damages being paid out by the shops, and hopefully what would be a faster and cleaner claims experience, especially for automotive claims. That would be one thing that I see timeline wise, because then the whole process is how fast can we get this done and move on to the next client, right? So delivering a better claims experience hopefully delivers a more long-standing loyal client because of, the differences between companies, James. That would be my first thing. The other thing I would say is that hopefully the backlog with respect to the whole buying process of vehicles and getting parts for used vehicles. So for claims in that example, I'm hopeful that whole process will be quicker as well, because as we've talked about many times now on these episodes, that delay really falls back then on a negative experience to the client. And as a result, even if the anger is not in the right place, they might be upset with the insurance company, right? Just because of the fact that process has to be explained to them, saying, hey, we know you want your vehicle back ASAP, but also as a note reminder, it might take us 2 weeks to get these parts and we're doing everything we can, right? So that's part of, I think, the servicing side of the adjusters that work with the insurance companies. And I don't necessarily know, because I don't have those conversations every day, but I'm not sure if maybe the adjusting itself has been, hyper overloaded to the point where people necessarily don't want to become adjusters, or if maybe there's a concern about wait times and they're doing whatever the best they can. I don't know all that stuff, right? That's way over my head and behind the scenes. But I would say that if that whole experience is streamlined and a client is happy, we typically would hear that feedback. And I mean, I don't necessarily hear that very often on the brokerage side.
Yeah, it's
right. We only hear typically a little bit if the client wants to share with us, but it's not every claim, for example, that I hear about how it went. Unless
you realistically only hear the negative, right? Like a big thing I always say to people, and they're always like, "Oh, well, this insurance company doesn't really have that high of reviews," and I'm like, okay, but look at it from a realistic standpoint. No one's going out there and reviewing insurance companies when they do good stuff. They only go out and review insurance companies when they do bad stuff. So of course the reviews are going to be low. I always basically just push them towards our office's reviews and go, look how many reviews we have compared to an insurance company. Look what we're doing for our clients, right? So that's where I think that's where you take the negative away. But again, that just kind of explained to clients a lot of times. I never say, it's never realistically the insurance company. It's the broker that you have and what they can do for you. And again, basing that off reviews, I would put our reviews up against anyone else's, because again, I feel like we do a good enough job to explain things to people and again, set realistic expectations with our clients and go, you know what? Like, unfortunately, this is just going to take a little bit longer than we're used to. And again, that's just kind of how the world that we're in right now.
Yeah. Everything takes a little bit longer. I think that's almost an expectation in all industries, whether it's food, purchasing of products everywhere, right? And a lot of people are growing to be maybe a little bit more impatient with the average experience, but also just when they go somewhere, if they're paying for a product or service, it's almost like, well, I'm not going to take no for an answer, right? This is what my personal expectation is. Social media hasn't helped with that in any way, because now we see more and more of that stuff on the daily. But yeah, I don't even know what my point was going to be there. Just that, in general, service is it's harder and harder to meet client expectations, I guess, in the world, not necessarily all industries, but in the world right now.
Yeah, exactly. So what would you say your kind of takeaway for this episode would be?
I think it always goes back to my kind of self-plugs thing, because insurance is such a, not a hated industry, but I feel like a lot of people don't always value it. So I would say that if you're not happy with your current program, kind of who you have it with, where your home and auto insurance is stationed, or, if there's concerns, it's always worth reaching out to someone new and maybe trying a new relationship and seeing if there's value elsewhere. So my takeaway would be, kind of maybe, again, do your own due diligence, but also find someone that you know, like, and trust, because the best source of having someone that's looking after you is someone you know, like, and trust. And that also helps build other businesses and referrals and all of the good stuff that comes with business. And my only takeaway on the service side of things would be, in general, I think we all need to have a little more patience. And if you give patience to people, they're more likely to actually go out of their way to do, maybe not only faster work, James, but higher quality work as well. And I know that's technically not always what people want to hear, but the reality is I think that happens in all businesses, right? If you're rude to someone, they don't really want to help you.
Yeah, I would kind of go along the same lines as that and say, you know what, I think we really have to set our expectations. And again, coming from myself, I don't want to set these expectations, but unfortunately I kind of have to, where things are just going to take a little longer than they need to take, because again, we're in this world where we've seen customer service has really declined, and we just kind of have to, again, I'm not saying that it's the right thing to do, but there's times where I combat it, and there's other times where I just go, you know what, like, it's going to be what it's going to be. I can sit here and rant about it for 4 hours to someone, but realistically, it's just going to fall on deaf ears, realistically, because does that person really care? No, because realistically, they're just a 9-to-5er. They just want to do their job and they want to go home, right? So I would just say, again, trust who you're working with, but also trust the process. And that process, unfortunately, just takes a little bit longer right now. Yeah.
I mean, that's the reality of it on, unfortunately, all sides. So that's a great final takeaway, I think.
But thank you guys for tuning in this week. Again, we're kind of trying to get back on schedule with kind of some scheduling issues we've had the last few weeks. So this actually is being recorded on the 18th, is basically going to go out the same day. And then we will be back recording tomorrow for next week's episode. So we'll be back on track finally. So we're not having to basically push out a bunch of episodes in the same week. But yeah, it's always nice to kind of get episodes out and, again, kind of spread the education and knowledge to as many listeners as possible. And on top of that, we're getting close to 30 episodes already this season. So that's really cool too.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's been a long season, or at least it's felt like it's been long. We've been doing, basically weekly ones now for a while, but it's always exciting to have different topics pop up, because it brings up things that you don't always think about on the day-to-day as well.
Exactly. And again, I'm already kind of seeing there's going to be a lot of update episodes, because there's a lot coming down the pipeline for things that we've talked about maybe 6 months ago that really have changed. So look up for those episodes coming soon as well.
Yeah. And we appreciate everyone listening in, like always.
And we'll check you guys, I guess, next week on the Broker Breakdown.